All right, once again, good morning, everyone. How we doing? All right. I am Michael Hardy, Executive Vice President, General Counsel of National Action Network, and I have the honor and privilege this morning to bring to you the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Prior to joining the Biden administration, Secretary Buttigieg served 2 terms as mayor of his hometown of South Bend, Indiana. A graduate of Harvard University and a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, Buttigieg served for 7 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, taking a leave of absence from the mayor's office for a deployment to Afghanistan in 2014. In 2019, he launched his historic campaign for president, and in December, he was nominated by President-elect Biden to be Secretary of Transportation. He was confirmed by the Senate on February 2nd, 2021, became the first openly gay person confirmed to be a cabinet secretary in the United States. I always joke and remind people when the secretary was here in 2019, we all gave him a kind of polite reception, but when he finished, we gave him a standing ovation. That's just how impressive he is, and I always kind of joke with him that you can ask Secretary Buttigieg the rotation of Uranus around the sun, and he'll give you a precise answer. Let's give a tremendous National Action Network welcome to the Secretary of Transportation, the Honorable Pete Buttigieg.
Well, good morning. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Hardy, for the kind and generous introduction. I don't know much about the rotation of planets, but I know about some other things that I'm really looking forward to speaking with you about during our brief time together. I want to thank the Reverend Sharpton, who I spoke with yesterday evening. I want to thank the National Action Network for the important leadership that you provide time and time again. This organization has been there to champion the cause of justice, and that cause has never been more urgent. Its champions have never been more needed. I want to thank the Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, Chair of the Board, Senior Vice President Ebony Riley, and the many dedicated leaders and organizations represented here today, including, I know, Dr. Harry Williams of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, Mark Morial from the National Urban League, who has been such an important partner in our efforts, and all of the leaders, as well as my administration colleagues who are here today. So yesterday I was on my way to a meeting about transportation in the West Wing of the White House, just as some very good news was coming in from the Capitol. I was in the lobby there, waiting to go in, and a door opened, and through it walked the next Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Judge Jackson. What a great day that is. By a stroke of just good fortune and good timing, I had the honor of being one of the first to congratulate her on that good news. What a great justice she is going to be. Her background and her qualifications and her resume will make her an outstanding justice. And yes, so will her experience as the first black woman on the highest court in the land. And as somebody who has seen my own rights and those of my family come up for debate in that courtroom, I am so glad to know that her wisdom will be on that all-important bench. I'm so thankful that the President saw the historic opportunity of this appointment, just as I'm proud to serve on this team that he built, the most diverse cabinet and administration in the history of the United States of America. And as part of that, I'm here to share a little bit about the work of my department where I serve, the Department of Transportation, and what we're doing in this administration, what it means for you, and why the kinds of things that NAN works on matter so much when it comes to the kinds of things that we work on in the Department of Transportation. Now, I know that transportation may not be the first department that comes to mind, when some people think about civil rights and justice, not compared to the Department of Justice, of course, or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or Education, or others. The truth is, there has always been a deep relationship between the physical movement of people in America and the social movements for equality that have made this a more perfect union. After all, one of the seminal actions of the civil rights movement was the Montgomery bus boycott. One of the signal moments of the civil rights era was when Rosa Parks decided not to give up that seat on that bus. These things have always been related. From Plessy versus Ferguson, which was about who gets to sit where on a train car, to the Green Book that told African American drivers where it was and was not safe to go on road trips. Equal and dignified access to transportation has always been a critical arena in the struggle for equal rights, for the simple reason that we all need to be able to move about in order to prosper. And those who cannot move about their community or country conveniently and affordably face a barrier to prosperity. And on that front, we have some work to do, don't we? When black communities are more likely to lack decent transit to take people where they need to be, we have some work to do. When racial disparities run so deep that the number of deaths in traffic crashes rose higher for black Americans than any other group in America, we have some work to do. When community after community can point to that highway or that railroad that was built straight through a black or brown neighborhood, we've got some work to do. When people on the south side of Chicago who don't have cars in a neighborhood called Roseland, inside the city limits of Chicago, take longer to get to their jobs in downtown Chicago than people who do have cars who live in a town called Roseland in Indiana, 90 miles away, we've got some work to do. When investments do, in fact, come to a neighborhood or a community of color, and people who live there get up in the morning and see the construction site and look at the hard hats and the workers on that project and start thinking, no one on this job site looks like they grew up anywhere near this neighborhood, we've got some work to do. And the good news is we are here to do that work, and we are bringing real resources and dollars to do it with this time. That's what I'm here to share with you. That's what we're doing today. Look, I know that the black community has witnessed promise after broken promise in many areas of American life. That's one of the reasons why it was so important that today on the South Lawn of the White House, the President and Judge Jackson will be speaking about a promise kept. I know that one of those sets of broken promises in this country has been the promise of good, robust, equitable infrastructure investment. It was promised again and again to the point that Infrastructure Week became a running joke in Washington. But I am proud to report to you that after years, after decades of promises, President Biden, with your help, delivered a bipartisan infrastructure law with generational investments in American infrastructure. And now we are at work turning those dollars into real results for the American people. Infrastructure is not just an abstract policy or a purely academic concern. It is a physical reflection of our values as a society. You see it, you touch it, you stand on it. And we recognize that the story of American infrastructure encapsulates the good, the bad, and the ugly of our country's story when it comes to racial justice. At its worst, it can be a tangible monument to the injustices of the past. But at its best, it can be a road forward from that past for the people in the communities who need it the most. And that is especially true when it comes to economic development and economic empowerment. We are making investments right now that will empower black and brown communities with jobs, with wages, with income, from the largest cities to the smallest towns. We are empowering families with affordable ways to get to work, to get to grocery stores, to get to church, to visit family, knowing that transportation is the second highest expense for most households, especially low-income households, often even higher than food. We are working to create contracting opportunities for the black business owners who do such a good job of extending opportunity to others through their employees so that they can buy homes, so that they can have an opportunity to send their kids to college, so that they can pass along household wealth to the next generation. And we are putting hiring practices in place that will give people who actually live in those neighborhoods the chance to engineer and build the roads and bridges, the trains and buses, the tracks and the transmission lines that they and their communities will rely on. We are delivering more job training, more workforce development, better benefits, safer workplaces. And that is about empowering families to build generational wealth so that they, their children, and their grandchildren can build the prosperity that was kept from them for generations. Now, this also relates to environmental justice. These investments mean that black children whose playgrounds and neighborhoods are disproportionately impacted by the toxic air pollution that comes from cars and trucks can live healthier lives in a greener future that we're building. We're investing in resilience so that black communities that often bear the brunt of climate disasters like hurricanes and heat waves and droughts are better protected against any storm that comes their way. We're investing in cleaner buses and trains and ports and airports so that homeowners don't have to choose between living where the jobs are or breathing clean air. And we're taking urgent action knowing that transportation is the largest source of carbon pollution causing climate change, and that means we got to be a major part of the solution as well. In short, we're building a transportation future that is better, stronger, and fairer, where transportation access is truly equitable. And that means committing to the truth that the time, the cost, the safety of how you get around shouldn't depend on your race or your background or your zip code. Now, I have to confess, I have discovered in doing this work that not everyone is ready to hear about justice and equity in the context of transportation. Some, especially on cable television, seem to think that transportation is somehow uniquely immune to the impacts of discrimination and racial injustice that have affected every other part of society. Some have even accused us of injecting the issue of racial justice into the picture as if it had not been part of the story this entire time. So I want to make clear, calling for racial justice is not divisive. What's divisive is making excuses for the persistence of racial injustice. At a moment like this, with so much at stake, telling the truth is not divisive, it is imperative. If a highway was built to demolish or isolate a black neighborhood, that is divisive. Fixing it is not divisive. Fixing it is unifying. It is uniting because it is physically helping to stitch together a community that was divided. And if that community was divided using federal dollars, it should be reconnected using federal dollars. That's what we're doing in the Department of Transportation. We're not out there looking for culture wars. We're looking to do what's right when it comes to healing the broken places in our country, including in our transportation systems, because the only way to bring people together is to actually face the problem and start to fix it. As a friend of mine says, sometimes the only way out is through. And when we find a way through, when we find a way to fix the things that are broken, that will be incredibly unifying. That's our focus. So other folks might go around looking for what books to ban. We're going to go out looking for what bridges to build. But we can't do it without you. We're bringing more intention and more funding to these purposes than ever before, but it's going to take more than the actions of federal government. I promise we will do everything that we can. It's what is expected of us by the community, and I might add, it is what is expected of us by the president and the vice president. We will do everything we can, but it's going to take your continued leadership and your continued action as well. We may have got the infrastructure law passed and signed, but the work is just beginning. And many of these dollars will ultimately be spent by state and by local authorities. And too often, they aren't hearing from the people who need to be heard the most. So now is the time to sit down with your state and local officials to talk about your community's needs. Now is the time to make your voice heard at those public meetings, to make sure that that new bridge or bike path or bus route serves your community. Now is the time to organize the people in your neighborhood and pull up a seat at that planning table when they're discussing your transportation future. In other words, it is time to mobilize for mobility. And I just want you to know you will have an ally in that work in the Department of Transportation. If you are worried that a new transportation project could impact a community of color negatively, if your small business needs help applying for a contract, if your community has a plan to make your roads safer or your commute cleaner, we are here to help. I'll just close with a reflection about when I was last here and everything that's happened since. Since I was last physically with you at this event 3 years ago, so much has changed. In particular, a lot of people we have lost in our national life, but also people who have arrived in new ways in our national consciousness. We have lost giants in the civil rights movement, some of whom I had the honor of getting to know during my own campaign, like Congressman John Lewis and Vernon Jordan. We've also gained new, bold-faced names who were there before we had heard of them, but most of us hadn't heard of them 2 or 3 years ago, and now they're part of the firmament of our national life, from Amanda Gorman to soon-to-be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And what those names have in common, those who have passed out of our current daily national life and those who have emerged in it, is that they followed the lights of their talents and their conscience, and the life of this country found them in those key moments because this country needed them. And that's not just true for the famous names. That's true for everybody who has been making this world better. We are in a moment that is finding the need for people to step up, to be heard, everyone who cares about justice. This country's journey toward justice is crying out for action, and I know that the people of the National Action Network are ready to continue that journey and hear that call. I know none of us will rest until that work is done, and I welcome the call to work with you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for the chance to be with you today. Thank you.